Hey, welcome to another vlog. Just got my hair cut. Probably not great lighting to show it off or anything. Walking right into the sun. But got it cut by Carol Ann at Salon 626 in Santa Monica. If you need your hair cut. I'm sure she doesn't need clients. I think she's booked a lot of the time, but if you're looking for someone, she's great and a wonderful person. So today I thought I'd talk a little bit about art just because I love talking about art. And I think art's a fascinating thing because there's a lot of lines people draw in their mind of not only whether they're an artist, but whether things they look at are art. And a big piece of that is the left brain, right brain conversation that people have, which I think is a bull-hunky conversation. If you look at things that are supposedly not artistic, they usually are actually surprisingly creative. And people that say that they are not creative people or can't do creative things usually are just misunderstanding how much focus and effort it takes to become good in that thing. You can be, and there are people that will pick it up faster than others. That's not to say that's not true, but I think people oftentimes will have an example, say like, oh, this is a specific person in my life that, from what they saw at least, was able to pick up a thing and be very good at it very quickly. And I don't think that's the norm, but I think that establishes an idea. And then when they see a bunch of other people that are good at something, they start assigning that idea to those other people and not realizing that a lot of those people are taking years and insane amounts of hours sitting by themselves, learning that thing or being obsessed with that thing in order to be good at that thing. And that limitation people put on themselves can stop them from having a lot of amazingness in their life, just like being the idea of saying you can't be a photographer, for instance. My ex was a person that didn't believe she could be creative, and I tried to encourage the creative part of her, and she now takes amazing photos, and I think I think really all that took was her, one, removing the barrier she had on herself of saying she wasn't able to be creative, and two, once that barrier is down, being willing to put in the time to learn the craft, and in that case having someone to help push you through it. And I see it a lot. It's not that just happens to be an easy example, but happens a lot where I see people that say they're not creative and then later prove how creative they are. Not to mention, if you look at something that people like to put in the non-creative category of, oh, this person works with numbers, does math, does accounting, anything like that, you'd be surprised how much of that is actually creativity. When you think 1 + 1 = 2, you're like, yeah, well, that's a knowledge of data, right? You just have to know how the data works and how the function of plus or function of multiplying or functions, how that operates, and then everything is linear after that. But with more complicated situations and numbers that are not firm numbers that can be altered and affected by new things, you start getting into a surprisingly creative process. And any creative process is a muscle, just like anything you do. And some people might have a knack for developing muscles faster, or certain muscles, or might have other pieces of their life that happen to enable them in a way they didn't expect. Like, if you have done a lot of motor function things that make you very good at handling certain situations, you might be able to pick up a basketball and be more functional with that, or it might even be something surprising like an understanding of physics and geometry, knowing what part of the backboard to hit. I mean, maybe not on the first try, but after a few tries you can be like, oh look, when I hit this part of the backboard, this is how the bounce works, and this is how much energy I need for that bounce to happen, that kind of thing. And then you can suddenly be surprisingly good at that thing, even though you didn't have a lot of practice. But all you're doing is not being aware of the thing that did add up. Like you always have to get there, and so that whole piece is one of the interesting parts of art, is just seeing the barriers people put on themselves, and the sides, the whole side of the brain thing. Honestly, I feel like that's such a limiter on humans' understanding of art. But the other thing that's interesting is looking at the definitions of art and how people define art as viewers, because people will look at a piece of art and go, well, I don't think that's art. And sometimes the audience matters, but in the end, I think creation matters more than how someone analyzes that creation. So as far as creative things and positive things, because if something is meaningful enough to someone that they make it and it gets to exist, and someone else gets to go and decide whether they think it's art, that art gets to exist because of that initial creative inspiration. And I've had a lot of conversations with people about what is art as far as like commercial art, or like landscaping, or textures on 3D models. Like having someone that can look at a painting of a board painted black and be like, yeah, that's art, and then have that same person look at detailed texture painting on 3D models and be like, yeah, but is that really art? And I'm like, yes, of course it's art. What are you talking about? Everything's art. Not everything, but most things are art. When you're creating a business, there's art in that, honestly. I think there is a lot of emotional value to creatives, and not to creatives, to humans, in being willing to do art that means something to them. And art meaning something to the creator, I think, means more than anything. Because, so for instance, you look at art that is let's say a graffiti artist. You have the graffiti artists that maybe they don't care so much about the art of it, and they just want to have their name on stuff. So they're like going around just like, John, right? That doesn't really mean anything emotionally to the person creating it, except for that they are basically peeing on things, right? But if that same person goes, I want to do something big and bold and like lots of reds, and like, they're starting to make it a creative thing, then even if someone else comes up and goes, look at this trash on this wall, that's not art, that's vandalism, right? Sure, it is vandalism, but it's also art. And the defining piece of that wasn't the audience. The defining piece of that was the creator, in my mind. So you get into all these kinds of things with like people saying, well, landscaping isn't art. It's especially like commercial landscaping. Oh, that's not art. Or commercials aren't art. And it's like, no, they are. It's in the same way, things that we look at as definitively art, that were commissioned as commercial things to advertise religion, those were commercial endeavors, and the creative making that was painting that Sixtine Chapel because they had bills to pay and they were being told what to do. Granted, they can sass back by putting some Easter eggs in there, but or influencing so they can have their creative sass, which I think just adds layers to the art. But you know, creativity comes from all kinds of different places, but all those places tend to have some sort of craft involved and some sort of inspiration. And the inspiration isn't always I feel sad about this thing and I want to have a sad piece of art, right? Or I feel happy about this thing, I want to have a happy thing that expresses emotion. It can also be, I have a specific set of guidelines. I need to move this product and there's rules to moving that product. And that's just as much an influence for art, I think. I do think you can go too crafty. Like if craft is so much and part of the, and I guess craft isn't even the word, but the basics of what a type of art is, if that's so much the function, it's not to say I don't think it's art anymore, but the artistic piece of it definitely seems to become weaker. So for instance, with poetry, I'm not someone that listens to a lot of poetry, but I forget his name, but I was talking to a guy that's a successful poet, and you know, I think a lot of people think of poetry and they think of people rhyming stuff, like, oh, what rhymes with what? And this guy was like, poetry isn't about rhymes. That's part of the flow of it, and maybe there isn't rhymes in some poetry. What actually matters in poetry is using words to manifest a visualization and a feeling. I think he said feeling. I'm not remembering exactly the words he said. I'm trying to recreate it with my own words, but basically you're trying to get your audience to manifest a feeling and have that feeling basically be more important than the words. So if you can get someone to imagine being sad in the snow and being cold and alone in the words that you're putting together, you're doing something, you're moving that person. And it's, you know, it's interesting. After having that conversation with him, I've had interactions with people where we've talked about poetry and doing poetry, and those people were very excited about what they thought was a really good poem. And I look at the poem and I go, man, that doesn't do any of the things this guy pointed out. It's just like, you sort of get a visual, but it's just kind of fun, rhymey words that go together. And I think that's more of, not about that not being art. I think that's about the depth of art and how far you can go with art. And taking something that is the surface layer of something and understanding what the mechanics of what makes it more effective as a emotional impact on human beings, whether that be emotional, being sad, excited, uncomfortable, scared, hyped, whatever. Having an impact on humans is kind of what art is there for, right? Because And that doesn't have to be the audience. I think it's totally fine that art can have an impact on the creator, but I think it's that meaningful impact that makes art not just the logs you threw on the fire so you could stay warm. You went and drew on a cave to help and move and inspire other people in some sort of meaningful way. That was a lot of rambling. I don't think I've ever talked about art without someone else to bounce off of. It's gonna be interesting to watch this back and listen to myself, because of like, what did you just say? But yeah, I'll see you in the next one. See you tomorrow.